breadcrumbs are in your current work. Like, if you can remember them, then they're probably worthy of whatever you can do creatively with them. So, do you watch Naruto?
The sun is just the back of the moon. I just want the people to know out there.
When you were putting that set together, what were you thinking about?
That's a good question. I feel like one of the things that I think about when I'm putting together a set is like what I think will work for the audience. And then I think for this set, I was like, a lot of these are new poems, or there's poems that I haven't performed very much. And so I really wanted to incorporate like some sentiment from some of my old poems, but like what of my old poems were kind of alive in my new poems, and kind of work in that direction. So I don't know, this was a much more like, like loosely, hey, what can I experiment with, or what do these poems feel like on stage?
How would you say that approach to preparing a set is different than how you used to do it?
So I'm usually going for like a thematic feel. So I'm like, I want to present questions and conflict so that I can resolve them later on in the set, if that makes sense. And so like I'm pacing out the poems, and I'm giving dialogue inside of the set that kind of gives people like some questions, and then I'm typically ending it with like a piece that's typically kind of stronger in performance. A lot of times I'm going off book or off paper, and I'm trying to work in like some performance elements that I think kind of like shocks, and then also kind of brings some resonance to some of the questions that I've tried to pose.
What do you think poets need to be thinking about in 2025?
What are you saying in particular? There's an urgency to create, and I actually think that's like, it's good to create, but I also think that a lot of times people are creating out of a space of like what they see working. So they see somebody else like kind of creating like maybe this genre of poems, or this kind of poem, or this aesthetic. And because they see it being successful, they're like, how can I make poems that are like that so I can kind of have that kind of success? And I think typically when you're seeing people do that, you're seeing people living in their purpose. You know what I mean? So like you're seeing people taking a very concentrated and directed leap towards who they are at their core, and they're pushing that envelope. And if you try to do the same thing, then like it's gonna be like it's gonna be mimicry, right? You're gonna be like, man, I'm trying to do this thing, but like you don't have the access a lot of times to what they're doing and how they're like moving. But I think it's really important. I think for me as well, because I think there's a lot of spaces where I'm seeing like something that I like, and I'm like, I think I can do that artistically, but I'm like, is that something that I'm saying? Is that what I'm talking about in my work? And because like, if you're able to really think about that, I'm like, okay, I don't want to bring that to the stage or bring that to a space, because I can't even take it any further than that exact one poem. Like I can't do anything else with this concept except for this one thing. But with the Naruto thing, I could write 50 poems about it. With the Jehovah's Witness thing, I could probably write 1 million poems about it. And like how it kind of correlates with my faith. So it's like doing things now, or if you haven't yet, starting things that you feel like you could do for a very long time, and like really being able to identify those things in your current work. A lot of times like the breadcrumbs are in your current work. Like if somebody like lay out 10 of your poems, you'd be like, oh, this is what you're talking about right here, because it's like 9 of your poems that's in there. And then how can you dig more into that? And then once you figure that out, you probably have at least a career's worth of topics that you can really dig into. When I feel like if I can't think of something original than anything I haven't said already, then I would be like, let me put it to the side for now. Because if you think about it, like if you're like, I've said everything that I can say, then maybe 3 years down the line, you might realize like there are like 4 other levels that you didn't even explore. But because you've kind of written it off, like in your mind, you've kind of sectioned it off. You know what I mean? But I even think about with like kind of the faith stuff, and like some of the stuff about like leaving the Jehovah's Witness faith. I feel like I didn't even think about a lot of those poems until I sat down and was like, this is what my book is about. You know what I mean? And once I realized like that is what my book is about, now I'm like, there's 40 different things I'm like, I didn't even think about, like I didn't even register because I didn't think I had to think about it. So yeah, I would just say like, yeah, when you're creating, create as much as you can, as naturally as you can, put about 50% effort into creating things that feel uncomfortable for you to like try to like dig out. And then after that, you're like, okay, let me put it to the side until it feels natural again to create in that sphere. I think they're all important memories. And I think one of the things I think is harder, especially I think when you've left that space and you've like healed a lot of like, I think some of the like maybe like both like traumas, but also just like some like kind of like the weird, like kind of stuck in the mud, like from being in like old spaces. It's like, if you can remember them, then they're probably worthy of whatever you can do creatively with them. It's just a matter of like, okay, do I put it in a book? Like I probably have like 15 other poems about other instances, and maybe they make it into a book if I have like some kind of other thought or idea that might pair with them really well. But, you know, I think they're all important memories. They're all important things to like write about. And then after you've gotten the poems out, it's really a matter of like, okay, what belongs in this collection? I don't think I'm a particularly great like student, if that makes sense. Like I think like in like the conventional like learning experience, I wasn't like an incredible student, but there'll be like moments where like something will be put together for me and then I'm an expert at whatever it was. But I'm like, when I actually needed it in like in the actual space, it's like it was like really hard to access. But like when I'm writing a poem, I'm like, I think I'm going in with the thought that a concept or a word or a dynamic might be really hard to really grasp because it might have been hard for me to grasp. But like throughout the poem, I'm hoping to do certain things. It's almost like okay, so this is gonna so do you watch Naruto? Okay, yeah, that's right. You're right. Okay, so in or this is really the case in really most animes and like how like main characters like dynamics are like threaded. So like you'll have a main character who at the beginning is like annoying and he's relatively weak and he has all the disadvantages to pretty much make him an interesting person to look at because it's like all the other people are strong and all these other people know what they're doing, but like your main character is like this guy who's like, oh, he's like really weak in comparison. But then throughout the story, throughout the episodes, throughout the narrative, like they pick up these little small tools that they're like, you know, they might learn a move that nobody else really learned, but only because they worked really hard. Now they worked so hard that they know this move that everybody else's stuff looks a lot cooler, but he just knows this one thing and he does it all the time. You know what I mean? And then now because he knows that, he learns this other thing. He learns this other thing. And now 2 seasons down the line, you don't even realize it, but you're the main character is like the strongest person in the entire verse. But you didn't even realize it was happening. The main character didn't realize it was happening. And it was like, because nobody realized it was happening, at the end, it feels like that resonance that you feel because you're like, oh my God, like I didn't realize the thing that I'm watching is like, I'm watching the Hokage. I'm watching somebody become the greatest in the village not because they were gifted or because they came from this, which, okay, there's a lot of beef because Naruto's like low key, like kind of the chosen one. So it's like there's some amongst the Naruto fandom, there's like some debate there, but it's just to say like that's not how he's presented as a character. And I think that's like how I look at like when I'm creating a poem, I'm like, man, like this is not a thing right now, but I'm giving you the elements to know that like by the end, you're gonna feel like this was like a dynamic that, oh, I had all the pieces all along. I just had to like push this one concept, this one way of doing things so that by the end of the poem, it like actually feel the resonance, or at least I'm trying to access that, which is also the reason why I think a lot of my poems, I don't think I'm writing it from the end because I'm like, I'm at the end, you know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, how do I deconstruct my understanding so that I can get everybody on the same page so that we can work to where I'm at. Okay, so I think, and actually it's so funny. So on our podcast, on the Diversus podcast, me and Jeff had this conversation late last year. And like one of the things that we're talking about is like, I think my my particular problem is not that like I have ever really experienced a space where I don't have ideas. The problem is it's like where those ideas go. So like I started off like when I was much younger, before I even wrote any poems for real, like I was really doing like filmmaking. I was like I had this like I'm gonna age myself, but like my first like cell phone, I had like this ability like not it was like my first cell phone. My first cell phone that had a video like the potential for video. Like they had this function where like you could be recording and you couldn't like piece it together inside of the phone, but you could hit pause on the recording so you can kind of create like kind of like a stop motion thing. And I'm like, I would do that all the time with my friends. We would make like little videos with my friends, like really poor quality, but like we would do that all the time. But then like, you know, when it comes to like just life, work, school and all that other stuff, it was like I wasn't able to really dig into that as much. And then it wasn't until probably like in 2010 where I was actually in the poetry community. And I was like, I had first went to writer's block and then I went to the nest and went to all these things. So it's like, then I started creating poems and I started like, that used to be the only thing I would do. So I would like go out to poetry shows, perform. I would get booked to go out of, you know, a state, go out to different spots to perform, but that was all I did. And then I was like, I think during the pandemic, like we were like, we really wanted to create, but we really wanted to be able to like do video, like poetry content and stuff like that. But we were like, we don't want to book somebody every single time we had to do that. So we ended up getting the equipment in order to like do it ourselves. And so now I'm like, okay, as opposed to just doing poetry, now if I'm like, I don't really have a creative block, I'm just like, I'm working in the wrong creative space. So now if I'm trying to figure out something with a poem, like maybe I'm not supposed to figure it out right now. Like I'm not going to force it. What can I do photography wise? And then I'm like, when I finally started really pushing myself into like short films, now I'm like, okay, I don't have a photo project to work on right now. I'm not really working on a poem as of right now, but I have 1,000 short film ideas that I'm like, I can put together, I can like work on and like, or I can edit or screenwrite. So I don't think, yeah, I just think that I've always, fortunately, I think for myself, I don't think I've ever really had like a slow period as far as like what creativity is. It's always just been, where do I put that energy right now?